Hi everyone, this is a quick lecture overview for Chapter 1 of your text. I'm going to very briefly go over some of the key ideas, and then anything that you have other questions about, please feel free to ask or look for more detail within your text. So these are some of the key ideas from the chapter. One of the things we'll talk about a lot is first person language. So that is always putting the person first. So it's not an autistic person, it's a person with autism, um, things like that, so that the person doesn't feel that they're being judged or characterized by only that one characteristic. Note all of this stuff, the connotation around some of those labels can be detrimental or viewed certain ways in society. One of your assignments is going to ask you to examine that a little more deeply. But overall, just remember first person language, putting the person always first, not defined by their disability or impairment. These are some of the big terms for our course. The first one being exceptional children. So as we talked about in class, an exceptional child is anyone above or below the norm. So the question at the bottom is like, what is normal? Like, what defines normal? So as we study each of the different categories, you'll see that there is a definition of what is normal and then what categorizes or characterizes a person with that would fall under that particular category. So we will explore this term further as it relates to each of the different categories. There are two main terms you need to be aware of to begin with, disability and handicap. So a disability is the actual limitation. So if the person has, for example, a physical disability, then that would mean that for one reason or another, they have some kind of physical limitation. A handicap is the impact of that. So for example, we have handicap parking, right? So they are able to park closer. So as a result of maybe their physical disability, they use or utilize handicap parking. So they're able to be closer, so they don't have to walk as far, whatever the case may be. So when like we have ramps and all of that stuff, that's all to those are all handicaps. Like they can't walk up the steps. That's a part of the handicap, so that's part of the impact. So make sure that you understand the distinguish, or you can distinguish between the two terms. This is further explained in your text as well. These are some important terms we're going to actually talk about a lot in class. Looking at the prevalence, we'll look at the prevalence of each of the different categories as we go through the semester. And some of these things we're going to start looking at now, like related services and people involved in special education. So within your text, make sure that you're able to define each of these so that you bring that knowledge to class. When you're looking at becoming a teacher, whether you're going into special ed or gen ed, it doesn't matter. You will have students with disabilities and impairments in your classroom, so it's important to always keep in mind the suggestions that are in your text as well as the discussions that we have in class, because as I've mentioned, this could be the only class in special education you take prior to becoming a certified or licensed teacher. So you could be in front of students with these different categories of disabilities and impairments, and it's just you. So it is important that you do pay attention to these things. So the first thing here goes along with that idea of first person language. So you're going to focus on the person. They're not just a disability. Avoid stereotypes. So like for gifted, like super achiever might be something that you might say. So we even avoid things like, oh, you're so smart. And instead you want to say things like, oh, you worked really hard. So just kind of changing the language that you use. You don't want to pity anyone, so you don't want to say things like they suffer from, or they have to deal with. Those kinds of words would not be, or terms would not be good to speak of a person with a disability or impairment. And again, using that first person language. Some more things that you want to pay attention to. Um, Again, coming back to that first person language, like the person uses a wheelchair, right? And so make sure that you use correct terminology. We'll talk a lot about that in class. And that's really one of the reasons that I feel very strongly about offering this class face to face, because getting to be familiar with the different terminology and using the different terminology and being comfortable saying some of these things is very important. Okay, so, and people with disabilities and impairments are very active in the community and in society, so please don't mistake that for being something that's going to hold people back. These are the 13 different categories of disability. Um, we'll talk about how each of these are defined over the course of the semester. These are the categories as outlined in IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, that we're going to be studying all semester. And they actually are the 13 that the state of Illinois uses as well. So you can find out more if you just go to isbe.net. It's the Illinois State Board of Ed.net. And you search special education, you can find the 13 different categories and all of the explanations as defined by our state. We will talk about the pros and cons of labeling, but it is important that you take a look at some of these and kind of determine for yourself kind of where you stand, because people are all over the board. They don't necessarily agree one way or the other. So you should be familiar with the advantages and disadvantages and try to make some of your own decisions. Maybe some of you have personal experience that you can bring to the table. Maybe you have been labeled with a category, or labeled as having a specific learning disability or whatever else, and you can bring that knowledge of having that label or knowing someone with that label or seeing a student with that label, and what that does. Is that an advantage or a disadvantage? So we'll kind of explore that further in class, but it is important to take a look at that. So if we look at the students receiving special education services, ages 6 to 21, whenever over the course of the semester, whenever we refer to students, it's always ages 6 to 21. This is kind of old data, 2011, 2012, but you can see the categories there, specific learning disabilities being the largest, and then other disabilities being the smallest. Over recent years, autism has really grown as well, so I'll try to find some updated data there for you. Remember that other health impairments, or OHI as we might call it, includes things like ADHD, diabetes, epilepsy, all of that. So there's a lot of different things involved in that one. This has a breakdown of that total of the 100% of the total there, and by category and number of students, so you could kind of see. So if you're looking at that, it's over 5.7 million students that we're talking about. So we're talking about a very large number of students across the country. So no matter where you go to teach, you're definitely going to see people with different falling under these different categories of disabilities and impairments. These are some of the founders or contributors to the field of special education. All of these are described in your text. I would encourage you that if you have a specific category that speaks to you, that you find out who those special people are in those in that category and learn about them, because they really were the ones that kind of started it all for some of these different categories and just the overall development of special ed in general. So very important people. If we look very briefly at the history of special ed in the United States or in America, not that long ago, the mid 1900s, 70s, even 60s, 70s, people with disabilities and impairments would oftentimes be institutionalized, as opposed to being what we call it now mainstreaming or inclusion. And so it was the belief that they couldn't be in a general education classroom, that they needed to be separated. But now we have, if you go all the way down to the bottom there, we believe in inclusion. So that means that we include students with special needs or disabilities, impairments in our mainstream or in our general education classrooms as much as possible. So it's a change in philosophy from separating them to including those students. So it has definitely changed over time. So there are a number of different people who work with students with disabilities. And as I mentioned earlier, one of your important terms is related services. All of these are related services. So it is important for you to understand that it is more than just a special education teacher. You're going to rely on all of these different people. So things like an occupational therapist, counseling, the nurse, all of these people are going to be very important in the related services category, providing services inside or outside of school for students with disabilities. In order for this all to be successful, it is important that the parents are a major part of this. It is a collaborative effort to provide the best environment for students, not only collaborative on behalf of the teacher and the administrators and the related services people, but also with the family. So everyone works together to write that IEP and provide enough support to help the student be successful. All of these different service delivery teams are thoroughly explained here, so take a peek at these different levels of teams. We have the 3 different levels: multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary. Make sure you're familiar with those. And then we have 6 different types of cooperative teaching. So this is a very important topic in K-12 right now. Cooperative teaching is very prevalent, and we see this very often in schools. It's sometimes called like a push-in for the special ed teacher. So we'll talk more about these different types of cooperative teaching, but I wanted you to know because it is referred to in your text. So these pictures will help explain things to you. But again, make sure that you're familiar with the different types of cooperative teaching as explained there in your text. Also, if you Google it, you can find all different kinds of information on them. And even if you go on YouTube, you can find some different videos of the different teaching and stuff like that. We'll look at some of that in class as well. So here are just some recommendations for co-teaching. It's important to have discussions, talk about it, plan together, know what's going on. It's unsuccessful if you don't do those things. So take a look at all of these recommendations here, and when you're doing your observation hours, you may be able to see some of these things. And then the last idea here is UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. We will be exploring this further, but I did just want to include that because they do discuss it in chapter 1. So UDL is as it says there, the design of instructional materials and activities that allows the learning goals to be achieved or achievable by individuals with wide differences in their ability to see, hear, speak, move, read, write, understand English, attend, organize, and remember. So UDL, Universal Design for Learning, is really universal. So they're trying to appeal to all students to help all students be successful. Last idea is that if you have a disability or an impairment, it's not something that just disappears or goes away. It does follow you across the lifespan. So just because you have a specific learning disability in K-12 doesn't mean that when you get to college it's gone. So it does follow across lifespan. People may need support throughout the rest of their lives. So it is important to understand that concept as well. So make sure that if you have any questions, you bring them to me in class, and make sure that you complete the module for week 2. Thank you.